And to be honest with you, like, I got in too many fights. I mean, I've probably been in over 100 fist fights in my life. Right. And, I'm like 96-5. Right. And like, I'm like, and like, I remember those 5 and they were not pleasant. Like, one time it was like 4 dudes beat me up at the same time and I look like the alpha man afterwards. Right. But it is what it is. Right. Like, that wasn't a fair one. I had a gun put on me 3 times before I turned 18. But again, that's one of those things where I didn't have it glorious. I had a phenomenal childhood. I had a phenomenal, right? I could look at all the bad things. I could look at the mental health crisis and other stuff, right? And I acknowledge it, but I learned from those things, right? I wouldn't have been a collegiate hockey all-star if I wasn't a fighter and fast on the ice and aggressive, even though I was only like 135, 40 pounds as a senior in college, right?
Patrick J. Murphy was the first Iraq War veteran elected to Congress and later served as Undersecretary of the Army. Today, he's an entrepreneur and policy advocate who empowers other veterans building businesses, which means he spent a lot of time inside serious institutions where people disagree loudly and the consequences are real. I wanted to have Patrick on Choose the Hard Way because he has practical and interesting ideas for how Americans from all backgrounds and political persuasions can communicate and connect. We're here today to talk about service leadership and what it takes to have an actual conversation with another human being who does not agree with you, which is a dying and much needed art. Choose the Hard Way as a community who knows that hard things build stronger humans who have more fun. Thank you for being part of this community. And please take a second or 3 seconds to hit 5 stars and subscribe to this podcast wherever you watch or listen. Whether you've been listening since 2018 or you're new here, the number one thing you can do to support this project is to become a paid subscriber to the Choose the Hard Way Substack. That's at alwaysthehardway.substack.com or just search for Choose the Hard Way in the Substack app. As always, that link is in the show notes. You can also find it in my link tree at HardwayPod on Instagram. Scripted and robotic is out. Real is in. The communication landscape has changed, and yesterday's media training just doesn't work. That's why I started One Real Voice to provide the training and narrative development senior executives need to thrive in the dynamic, open-ended communication formats that are mission critical for their roles. Whether you need to be great on podcast panels or in front of the company or your team, I'll coach you to be a confident and effective communicator using a methodology grounded in behavioral science, applied high performance, and the thousands of reps I've had as a professional storyteller and communicator over the past 28 years. When you're ready to be great, DM me at HardwayPod or email hello@onerealvoice.com. Crypto curious with over $1 trillion in transactions to date, blockchain.com is your trusted partner on your crypto journey. Go to blockchain.com to get started today. No experience required. Lauf is the Apple of bike design, and they make elegant products that just work better than everything else. And they're a lot of fun to ride. I love my Utald all-road bike and my Lauf Segla gravel bike, and I'm looking forward to getting outside on them soon. You can check them out at laufcycles.com. To learn more about Patrick, you can go to patrickjmurphy.com, and you can find him on Instagram at patrickmurphypa.
One of the things that really jumped out at me that I'm guessing you probably don't get asked about that frequently. What was your first shift at Perkins like?
Oh my God. The being like a 16-year-old waiter at Perkins Family Restaurant, working the graveyard shift. So there's 2 stories that always stick out to me. One was, I'd worked 11 at night to 5 in the morning. Now, again, I'm a 16-year-old high school senior, but I had hockey practice at 6 a.m., right? So I worked till 5. I hop in a car and I had to drive to the hockey rink, be, on the ice by 6 a.m., which was great, training to go on, obviously playing college, et cetera, down the line. But I will never forget on New Year's, I had to work the graveyard shift. And I went to a party before I had to go to Perkins. And I was dating this girl, her name was Jem McGinty, who I was like really liked and all this stuff. And I left the party as she was drinking. I couldn't drink, so I had to go to work. And then I go to work the night shift. And then she hooked up with another dude that night. And I found out about high school. I remember like, I'm probably the only guy in high school that works a graveyard shift that I know of. Like, right? And I'm like, God bless America. But I'm like, but I'll never forget that. God bless her. I think she married a cop in Philly, and it's all good. And that was the end of our relationship. But that's one of those things you just got to smile and I had to work. I had to work 4 jobs when I was in high school to go to college, go to community college first, and then gave plasma down the line and stuff. But like to me, Perkins was a great breeding ground. I started earlier at Italian. It was called the Italian Family Restaurant, and I was a busser there. I was a cook at Pizza Hut, but to make tips as a waiter, that was as a 16-year-old, that was awesome. Set me on to go be a waiter at Olive Garden. So there you go.
Oh wow, Olive Garden, unlimited breadsticks, a lot of great memories at Olive Garden. What did you learn about people and about yourself from working at a restaurant? Such a formative experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, first off, it's about service, right? So like when people sit down within 60 seconds, even if you're going there, hey, I'm Patrick, I'm your waiter today, can I help you? Can I need some waters or bring waters right away? That type of thing. Like, don't make them sit there and wait for 5 minutes as if they're not wanted, right? So even if it's like real quick, hey, I'm grabbing this food, but I'll be right with you. Give me a second. But, just say hi, introduce yourself, remind them. But also like, listen, I teach at the Wharton Business School. Like, I tell my students like ABC, always be closing, right? So, when I was at Olive Garden, it was later on, after I was in the Army a little bit and I was working my way at that point, the Army had cut me loose to go to law school, but I was working there. And I remember, I was the number one on the add-ons. Add-ons, you might say, like add-ons are appetizers, wine, drinks, dessert. People, if you say, hey, would you like dessert? You want to see a dessert menu? It's easy to say no to a menu. It's easy to say no to a theory, right? If you bring that tray, you do that extra little effort, bring in that tray with the cheesecake, with the hot fudge, with the chocolate cake, etc., and you show them how it looks, and you say, hey, can I interest you in one of these desserts? They're like, yeah, I'll grab that. Now again, that's another 20% of your bill, and I'm going to make 15, 20% in tips. That's why, for me, it was like, you learn how to close. You learn that, you give people options and you visualize it and you let them, live that experience. And it takes a little extra hustle, right? Because you're not always going to say yes, right? But just like the wine bottle, I would say, hey, can I get you a glass of wine with this, chicken parm or whatever, the tour of Italy, those entrees at Olive Garden. And you bring the bottle of wine over. And of course, they're like, hey, maybe I'll give it a shot. I'll have a glass, Rob. And so I learned, and they trained you on that. But
right.
Most folks then just half-ass it, right? I was like, I gotta make money so I could pay for my law school, like because the Army coming loose, it was on my own dime.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before we started rolling here, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours, Jonathan Kaplan, and he knew I was going to be speaking to you today. And Jonathan didn't put it quite this way, but do you personally hold Jonathan Kaplan accountable for your opposition receiving massive funding to oppose you in your first congressional race?
Listen, I love Jonathan Kaplan. And again, talk about the hard way. Listen, politics is the art of inclusion. And there's going to be people that don't like you. My first interaction with him was not great. Like, he basically like.
Tell me about it.
So listen, I'm running, and it's the whole adage of like victors have 1,000 fathers, losers are orphans. So when I win by 0.6%. The New York Times does this thing called Macho Dems. They got Patrick Murphy, the Iraq War veteran. He's sure the NFL quarterback. Look at these winners, and Rahm Emanuel's taking a victory lap, and God bless Rahm Emanuel, right? But what people don't realize, a year earlier, I go down the DCCC. I'm like, hey, listen, I'm running for Congress. Here's my 8-page prospectus. It's colored, it's charts. All this, like, as a former, West Point professor and, paratrooper Navy State Airborne Division, I'm giving my bio and all this and how I'm going to win. Rahm Emanuel looks at it for like 60 seconds and he goes, all right, he flips through it. He goes, hey, don't come back down until you raise $250,000. And I was like, okay. Like, I didn't know he was giving me the finger, like kind of, right? Because he had someone else, multimillionaire, he won the race. And I was a poor kid from, Northeast Philly. But I didn't know any better. So then when I win the primary, Rahm's coming in, Congressman Manuel's coming in to support Admiral Joe Sestak and Lois Murphy, who's now a judge, but she was a congressional candidate in another district. And this is all the suburbs of Philly. And I kept saying, like, hey, Rahm, I heard you're coming to Philly. Can you come and help me out? Can you come and, endorse me? Can you come make it look like our race is also important? He goes, yeah, I'll do something for you. Come to Coatesville. And I go to Coatesville, which is not in my district. I had to drive for him to be like, to show up, or he's still with me. And Jonathan Kaplan, being a good reporter he is, basically he's like, if this is such an important race for Congressman Emanuel, why aren't you in Bucks County? Why aren't you going to his district? And he's like, it is important, whatever. And he asked me, and I'm like, hey, listen, I'll take his endorsement wherever I can get it. Like, we're going to win this race. And this is, and like, I just let it go. But I remember after the fight, I'm like, yo, Jonathan, what was that, man? Come on. Like, I give him a hard time, but he was doing his job. I didn't take it personally. He's a hell of a writer, hell of a reporter. And we laugh about it now, but yeah, he gave me the hard and fast, rules of you're in the big leagues, and I always tell these young, because I help a lot of veterans run for political public service. There's 600,000 elected positions in America. There's only 535 in the federal government. It's like the top, 0.01%, whatever it is. And I tell them, like, listen, you can't take this stuff personally. And politics, if you get offended easily, that's not the profession for you, because you got to understand people might come hit you, and sometimes it's not going to be personal. It's just, you got to roll with the punches, and you got to get better every single day.
So how many times did you end up running for office?
I ran, in primaries and generals. So I ran 4 times. So, and I won. So everyone has a primary and a general. So, so I won the first time, won the second time. I lost in a crazy wave in 2010. 63 of us lost. The average loss was 24 points. It was the Tea Party wave of 2010. I lost by 6 points. And that's why, not to be cocky, but like, that's why a lot of the Democratic National Party, they're always trying to run again. Like, Patrick, you're popular, you can win. That was a bad year. I'm like, I know, but I got to raise my kids. I'm a veteranpreneur now. I invest in veteran companies. I'm teaching a war business school. Like, I'm in a different phase of my life, but I'm very passionate about public service. I'm very passionate about my brothers and veterans. Whether it was my time in Congress or even now, I'm always trying to give back and make our community and our country better.
And let's talk about the loss a little bit. What happened, and what did it feel like when it happened?
It's interesting. So a couple of things. One, when I was in Congress, I know it looks super glamorous on the outside, and this is the Capitol, it's beautiful and all that stuff, right? But I was sleeping in my office. I was the 3rd least wealthy member of Congress, right? So, I mean, I had great credit, but like, I was still paying like my mortgage. I'm to this day, I still have mortgage, and I still have like student loans, right? So for me, like, but I was like the poorest wealthy person that I knew, because, on the outside, yeah, I was making $170,000 a year, but, I had a wife, we just had our first kid, then we had a second kid, she was out of work for a little bit. Like, we have a mortgage back home. I'm living in my office, like on an air mattress, right? That I would tuck under my couch, for the day when people would come in. But the loss itself, I remember reading the New York Times, and it was basically like, who's going to win, who's going to lose, where is it? And I'm saying my race was a toss-up. And I felt good because, like, I'd co-authored great legislation like the post-9/11 GI Bill, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I brought back thousands of jobs at Bucks County, Pennsylvania, my district I was representing. But I will tell you, I remember going into, but I knew it was a wave, right? I just thought, in my heart, I was like, I feel good. I knew it was a tough environment, but I also knew that, like, it was going to be a wave year. And the demographics of where I am, I'm not to be a jerk, but it's a little older. It's lily white. It's not a lot of colleges in my, like, so it was like the demographics weren't, in my way. And what I do tell young people, it's like demographics are destiny, right? If you're a Democrat running a Republican district or vice versa, you're not going to win, right? Like, you're just like, and so I bucked the trend for, a while, but, at the end of the day, I lost my last race there. I remember going to church, though, the Sunday before that Tuesday election. And I remember thinking, I know what the numbers say. Our polling showed it was the margin error. It had me up 1 point, but it's 5 points with the margin error. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to ask God to let me win. Like, he has a plan. And I was like, and God, so I'll never be disrespectful and ask you for me, right? You have a plan. I'm not sure what's going to happen on Tuesday. I hope I win. And so I've been working my ass off. I raised $5 million the last 2 years, all this stuff. But I said, whatever happens, I trust in your judgment. And so when we lost that Tuesday night, I'll never forget. We have, what we was hoping to be a victory party. It was, I had to concede. And it was my son's birthday. So I make an announcement. Hey, listen, I just called, the Congress-elect and, told him that congratulations. We came up a little short. I take responsibility. I want to thank everyone for, being with me the last 4 years. I hope I made you proud. We did this together, et cetera. But I was like, listen, everyone, I'm sad. Everyone can be sad. But guess what we shouldn't be sad about? Today's my son's first birthday, Jack Murphy. Can we sing happy birthday to my son, right? And so we sang happy birthday. Now he's 1. He didn't know. His sister was, at 5 at the time. And I say that because people were crying and they're like, how could you it's such a moment. I'm like, listen, I got shot at for a living. I got mortared, right? Like life is good. It's not 138 degrees where I'm not showering for weeks. It's like, we're blessed to live in the greatest country. And I was blessed to serve in Congress. But I will tell you what, after that night, the next morning, I still showed up at the train station. I was tired. It was a long campaign, but I thank voters for letting me serve them for 4 years in the United States Congress.
You've lived it from every angle. I have been involved in political activism for a long time, certainly not at the level and with the depth that you have, quite obviously. But, I remember I helped bring James Carville and Mary Madeline, bipartisan effort here, to my college to speak, got to spend some time with them in the early days. And as you noted, people kind of have this idea of what that life is like. And as right. You said, hey, you were sleeping on the floor of your office. One of the books that I read that for me gave me the best sense of what running a campaign is actually like is Jason Kander's book about what his experience was like running for different political offices and then ultimately leaving offices for mental health reasons. What's it like to be out there campaigning? What is a day like? And then when you're actually a member of Congress, what is that like?
Yeah, I never took off the throttle. I'm all gas no brake kind of guy, right? So for me, even after the campaign, when I was governing, we still averaged 15 events every Saturday. So I work 6 days a week. I take Sundays off to the devout Catholic. Now listen, I take off, but I'm with my kids and right. I do read the paper, which is kind of part of my job. But it was definitely I wouldn't do any official events on Sundays unless it was something I had to go, emergencies right. or something like that. But yeah, because they all swallow your whole time. And my whole thing is the best job I will ever do in my life is to be a father. It's my responsibility. I can't outsource this out. So I'm going to carve out time during a week when I can. But I live in a different city than my ex-wife and kid. Well, now my ex-wife, right? And my kids. So I'm going to be present on Sunday. I'm going to sleep in with them and then go to church and I'm going to, go to brunch and all that stuff. Right. But so I would say to you, it's don't get too high, don't get too low. Different examples, this is being age 33. I was the youngest Democrat in the country, representing a swing district that, is only the 3rd Democrat ever. And, some people thought I was a god, oh my God, you win where we don't win. And I was part of it's luck, right? I'm an Iraq War veteran. I was the only Iraq veteran in Congress at the time. And I was the number one issue, right? So I was blessed in timing on that. But I also didn't get too low. When I lost, it was listen, I was blessed to serve and I'm a winner in life, right? I do everything I can to win, but I couldn't take it personal. It was a wave election, all this other stuff. There was no scandals. There was I served with honor and integrity, and I was proud about that. And I was gracious when I won, and I was gracious when I didn't win. And I think that's what's missing, frankly, too much in office now. And I think the other thing I would mention is you hear right now a lot of members of Congress won't do town halls. They're well, it's going to get too feisty and astroturfing and stuff. I was there I was a co-author of the Affordable Health Care Act, and to me, it granted healthcare access to 20 million more people. It covered women for contraceptives. It covered women they couldn't charge women now for more healthcare, and they were charged more before. And it made all Americans, you're covering your parents' insurance plan up until age 26. So I was proud about that effort. But I did like 10 town halls. And then after a few of them, the Republicans were saying, oh, well, you're picking what questions you're talking to. I'd be there for hours. I was like, all right, well, I'll get the newspaper to frankly, do the questions. So there's like a moderator, so people can't say I'm, hand selecting. And it was this live event. Nowadays, like there's folks that haven't done it in years because like, well, and to me, and at that time, like I had death threats against me and my kids. And there was my classmate after a month after we lost, she was, they tried to kill her. Gabby Gephardt, she was shot in the head back in Arizona. We were classmates together. We traveled to Israel together, me and her husband, Mark. And I say those things because like I would tell my team, listen, I got shot at and I got mortared when I was in Baghdad, Iraq, in the invasion in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne Division. I go, but political public servants, you shouldn't be getting shot at and shouldn't. And that's what's wrong with politics today in America.
Right.
We just have our governor of Pennsylvania is Josh Shapiro. They just blew up the governor's mansion trying to kill him and his wife and kids. Donald Trump, they literally shot him, in the ear in Butler, Pennsylvania, and they tried to get him in his golf course. Like that's wrong. And people should know better. And I think that and again, I'm a proud Democrat, but I will tell you that if you're a Democrat calling Donald Trump a Nazi on television, you're wrong. You're wrong right now. Like, and stop. And it's like the hysteria industrial complex. Like I get it. It's infotainment, far left, far right, but get people in there that are trying to put the country first. And again, I'm not saying honky dory, everything's great, but be honest with people and don't lie. Because, at West Point, when I was a professor, we have this thing, it's called the honor code. I can say not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate those who do. We tolerate too much BS in Washington on both sides, and we got to put an end to it to move this country forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, Patrick, the question I'm going to ask now is a relatively simple one, and it's a very big question also. And we can abstract this away from Democrat, Republican, just generally within politics and within culture right now. As you noted, there's this hysteria industrial complex, something I think about a lot. I know you have written about it. I have written about it. Is outrage is really a trap. And what it does is it puts people into spectator mode. It dissociates them from their agency. It takes them out of the democratic process. And something that I think technology also has done, it's enabled greater synthetic connection. It's also made it possible for people to say and do things I don't think that they likely would ever do sitting down face-to-face, one-on-one. They might do it if they had a group standing behind them. Dialogue seems to be a disappearing and dying art in America. In this environment now, what does it take to actually create change and for people to have an effective democracy and to move beyond outrage and into actual activism and creating something different if that's what they want?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And I know you've written about it and you're spot on. I will tell you this. We need more moral courage. It's like dialogue. That means talking to people that you might not agree with. There's a reason why I go on Fox News and Fox Business, right? They don't agree with my premise, right? But there's more Democrats that watch Fox News than watch MSNBC. Now, again, I used to work for MSNBC. I love the I love the network. But to me, it's like, as Americans, we got to move the country forward. And even if I'm there debating against 4 conservative women, which I do on Outnumbered when I'm on that show, it's a new show, like that's what you have to do. And again, I'm a proud Democrat and I'll go there and I fight the fight. And I'm not saying I'd agree with Joe Biden on everything, right? But, when I disagree with him, I would say it. But I would stand on my own damn 2 feet and talk to people and let them know, what was going good or what wasn't going so good. And if you're a Democrat and you can't say one nice thing about Donald Trump and Trump 2.0, he's done some good things, right? Some really bad things too, right? But if you can't acknowledge the other side and what's good. Like if you can't acknowledge it, Donald Trump put pressure on to release, 38 hostages in Gaza, that were in captive for 2 years. Like, granted, he worked with the Biden administration, all that stuff, right? But that's a positive thing. If you can't acknowledge the fact that he got European countries, the EU, to do more defense spending, so it wasn't just America being the policeman in the world, that they need to understand what's going on with Russian great aggression, because they were only spending 1.9% of their GDP. They were supposed to do at least 2%. Now it's America, we do 3.5%, right? And granted, we do 3.5%. We had the biggest economy in the world, so it's all relative. But he does put pressure on that, right? So you got to acknowledge he does certain things. If you can't do it as a Democrat, you're wrong. And if you can't do it as a Republican, you're wrong. Republicans aren't racist; they're not Nazis, and Democrats aren't socialists. So stop. And if you're into that line of thinking, that groupthink, as you mentioned, you got to break yourself out of it and stand on your own damn 2 feet.
And when it comes to actually changing things from the perspective of legislation and actual participation in the democratic process, rather than yelling at a TV or going on social media and whatever side you might be on and yelling at each other, what can people actually do? What action can they take that is effective at shaping our democracy?
I would say amplify the voices that you believe in that are doing the right thing, even if you don't agree with them all the time. Right? So I tell people, and the best thing you can do for me is, follow me on Instagram and social media. I'm at Patrick Murphy PA. Subscribe for free to my Substack, stuff like that, right? And I tell people, and then when you see it, share it, right? And say, hey, I really appreciate Patrick Murphy's, commentary on this, or I disagree with Patrick Murphy on this too, right? But part of that engagement, I think, is important. I think, and supporting candidates that you believe in. I'm a big fan of Jared Golden, former Marine. You live up in Maine, he represents Maine. Angus King is a friend of mine. I served on a cyber commission with him. He was our chairman. I think Angus King is a great statesman. He's independent. I'm a big fan. And so it's easy to be against people, right? It's easy to be outraged, but you also have to be for other people too. So it's okay to say why someone should be fired, but why should the other person be hired? And I think we get away from that far too much, but it's that engagement. It's about following them on social media. It's about sharing their stuff. It's about being active in campaigns and volunteering your efforts and giving your time and talent to a cause greater than yourself.
Patrick, you've found yourself throughout your career in new operational environments, whether it's Perkins, the Olive Garden, community college, being a JAG in the Army, serving overseas, being a member of Congress, being a professor at West Point, at Wharton, being an author, running your own consultancy. When you're entering a new operational environment, what do you think you bring with you that enables you to adapt? And what should someone do when they're in a new operational environment and kind of orienting themselves?
Yeah. Well, it's like I choose the hard way, right? And part of that is as the great book says, the obstacle is the way, right? So do hard things and do them well. So for me, being one of the poorest members of Congress, it probably shocks people because I started at community college and I started, very blue collar. I was first generation college. My dad was Navy vet, then served as a cop in Philly for 20 years. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, and I'm not complaining about that, right? It's just I had to get plasma because I had to get plasma. The extra $25 a session was worth it. I would say to you, but raising money probably surprised me, but I was third in the country in raising money every 2 years, right? The only two people that beat me in my side of the aisle was Nancy Pelosi and Kirsten Gillibrand when I was in. And I've raised over, help me and my partners, we've raised over $250 million to invest in veteran-owned companies because access to capital for veterans is really hard. So that's really hard work, to ask people to give away their money to invest in veteran-owned companies or to invest in veteran candidates, et cetera. But, that's what I do. It's one of the things I do. I'd also say I'm a big believer in having a growth mentality. If you're not learning every day, if you're not taking the time to read a paper, if you're not taking the time to read a book, and I say to myself, I read a book every month. Now I'll do some books on tape here and there, but but I try to literally physically read a book every month, at least one. That to me is important, right? Because it then quiets your mind to focus on a certain area without your phone buzzing, without this going on. And that's what all the great leaders do. And I'm not just talking about Warren Buffett and other, but like great military leaders, great political leaders. Like you got to take time to have that growth mentality to learn. And when you fail, which is okay, like never wait. And that's what too many people do when I say choose the hard way, like you do. Like jump into the deep end of the pool. It's going to be harder, right? But guess what? That's how you're going to learn if you can swim or not. You can practice all you want and learning all the instructional videos and right and be smart about it, of course, right? But at some point you got to jump in and get after it, right? To me, I wasn't a political science major. I wasn't a journalist major, right? I ran for U.S. Congress. I lost 19 of my brothers in Iraq in a war that I didn't think was right. We should have focused on bin Laden and bringing that man to justice because he killed thousands of innocent Americans on 9/11. And we diverted ourselves to the Iraq war when we should have focused on Afghanistan. And so that's why I ran. And then when I got there, that's why I did the GI Bill. That's why for my brother, now there's 800,000 folks right now using the GI Bill. Proud about that, right? And if you're one of them out there as your listeners, you'll be a Miller Lite when you see me out and about, right? By the way, that was a joke because I don't want to get ethics violations, no quid pro quo there about free Miller Lite for Patrick Murphy. But the other part of it, it's like, and people also said, like, for me, like the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, like I'm a straight guy. Why do I care so much about the LGBT community? Because I believe in our Constitution and equality. And you either believe in equality or you don't. You're either willing to fight for it or you're not. And I knew that our military has been this incredible change agent in American history. We democratized education after World War II with the original GI Bill. During the middle of the Korean War, we desegregated our military, which was segregated at that point, and half our country was still segregated. We had, you had African Americans couldn't go into restaurants or water fountains. We were ahead of the social change because we said, listen, you wear green, you bleed red. We don't care. We're not segregating our units anymore, right? And that was the middle of the Korean War. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which, the Murphy Amendment made that happen. We had kicked out 13,000 troops just because they were gay, not for misconduct, but just because of who they love. That's wrong. And because we got that through, then that ushered in marriage equality with the Supreme Court years later. And so, like, to me, that's what it's about. Are you paving the way forward? Are you getting better every single day? And then you're learning from your mistakes, and then those losses become lessons so you don't do the same thing ever again.
You're a father, and I read one of the Substacks that you wrote related to bullying, which I think is something everyone probably encounters at some point in your life. I know a little bit about your childhood from that piece. As you mentioned, your father was a veteran and he was a police. And I know that when you were 9, you were a formidable street fighter. If we were to go back to your childhood, how would you spend a day in your life when you were a kid during the summer?
Yeah, it's a lot different than my kids now, and God bless it, but we lived in a great neighborhood. We play stickball out in the street, basketball, ride bikes, all that stuff. Like, you're basically going from day to night. Now, I had a paper route since I was 9 years old, and like I was, mowing lawns. Now, not all day. I wasn't working 10 hours a day, so I don't want to make it like, but I would go have to mow some lawns in the afternoon. Then I had to go do this, and in the winter times I was shoveling steps and stuff, and so I was hustling, but there was plenty of time. And yeah, and to be honest with you, like, I got in too many fights. I mean, I probably in over 100 fist fights in my life, right? And I'm like 96 and 5, right? And like I'm like, and like I remember those 5, and they were not pleasant. Like, one time it was like 4 dudes beat me up at the same time, and I look like the Elephant Man afterwards, right? But it is what it is, right? Like that wasn't a fair one. I had a gun put on me 3 times before I turned 18. But again, that's one of those things where I didn't have it glorious. I had a phenomenal childhood. I had a phenomenal, right? I could look at all the bad things. I could look at the mental health crisis and other stuff, right? And I acknowledge it, but I learned from those things, right? I wouldn't have been a collegiate hockey all-star if I wasn't a fighter and fast on the ice and aggressive, even though I was only like 135, 40 pounds as a senior in college, right? I mean, now I'm 200 and, still got a 4-pack at 51 and still could throw hands if I need to. I don't choose to. I don't like to choose violence, but, if anyone ever hurt my kids or my family, they're going to meet their maker. I can tell you that. And I just think that America at her best is the Athens and Sparta of our country, right? And that we are the reluctant warrior, that those of us who have seen combat, those of us who train for combat, are the ones that push for peace the most, because we don't want it for our kids. We don't want it for our generation. And because it's never really the answer. And I learned the hard way. I don't say it lightly that I'm 96 and 5, right? Like, because sometimes, I would fight my next door neighbor who was a great dude, but we would fight over stupid stuff on stickball or, whatever, right? But that's what we did in that neighborhood. Like, that was just how we got by. And, but I had bullies that, because I was skinny and had acne and all that stuff, like, that would try and pick on me. And I wasn't taking any crap from it. I mean, even if they were twice my size.
What drew you to military service?
It's interesting. I was blessed in this way. People were like, man, Patrick, you were like the acting secretary of the Army. You were in charge of the Army, man. Like, and did you know that when you joined the Army at 19? And I was like, hell no. And I did, even like when people talk about like the Army Navy game, which was always in Philadelphia, I knew about the Army Navy game from television. I didn't know what West Point was, or, the Naval Academy was. And I didn't, because I'm, my parents didn't go to college. Like, I didn't know. Right. So for me to go there, to go teach at age 27, teaching constitutional law there was awesome. But when I joined at 19, it was because my college roommate's like, hey, Murph, like, there's this thing called Army ROTC, and you get to like rappel off the mountains here in like Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and you can maybe earn a scholarship. And we were both working waiting tables. We were ski instructors. We got jobs. Like, I mean, I went out to try for a ski instructor, by the way, in Montage Mountain in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I tried out in baby blue sweatpants. I didn't have like the fancy outfits, right? But I knew how to ski because I was a hockey player and skied like, maybe once a year in the ice of the Poconos. And I got the job, and they were like, listen, we're going to offer you the job, but you got to get like nicer pants and like the official ski job. I'm like, yeah. Like, if you're going to pay me, I'll go do it. But I'm not going to get nice gear unless you're going to pay me to go do this. And I got paid to do it. So I'd say to you, like, it was really my roommate. And then I just fell in love with the military. I mean, I would never have been a U.S. congressman or been secretary of the Army or even been a West Point professor if it wasn't for the Army and me competing against other guys and gals. When I was going away for summer training in places like Fort Knox, Kentucky, and Fort Bragg, North Carolina, people in my platoon, like 40 men and women, they were going to Notre Dame, they were going to Harvard, right, going to Georgetown. And that was the first time in my life that I'm competing against these guys and gals. And I saw with my own eyes, I was just as good, if not better. And I'm like, damn, I'm pretty special. God gave me some talent here. And I love calling cadence, marching and, singing. I loved, I love shooting. I'm a hell of a shot. And so I was at light infantry units and I just loved the discipline, the camaraderie, and the purpose-driven life that the military offered me at that time.
Patrick, I'm a Buddhist, and one of my favorite teachers of Zen Buddhism described Buddhism. He was asked to reduce it to one sentence, and he said, if I had to describe Buddhism in one sentence, I would say it's the idea that everything changes. And another favorite teacher of mine, Joseph Goldstein, describes it as the idea that anything can happen at any time. And in the times that we're in, I think it's something that can be easy for people to forget. And when I think about being born an American, which I'm very grateful I was born in this country, and I think stories like yours illustrate that anything can happen at any time. And I think that's possible for anyone, anywhere. I just personally, I love America. I feel very lucky that I was born here. And when you think about what the future holds for this country, what is possible for this country and for Americans?
Yeah. First off, kind of about you being a Buddhist, it's one of the reasons why I love Pope Leo and I love Pope Francis, because they believe in the pluralism, that we're all sons and daughters of God, right? And as children of God, one child is not better than the other. Just because I believe I have a certain, it's all the fundamental, like the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. Be a good person. Feed the hungry. Administer to the sick. Right. So anyway, I'll stop talking about the Beatitudes, but like that to me is the beautifulness of it. And by the way, same thing goes if you're an atheist. Be a good person, right? Because you want to, again, the golden rule: treat others how you want to be treated. But I would say what gives me the most hope about our country is that even in our blueprint of our nation is the U.S. Constitution, which is a righteous document. And even in that preamble of the Constitution where it says, in order to form a more perfect union, those forefathers knew that was a compromise bill. We declared independence in 1776. We didn't pass the Constitution for years and years later. But even that Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union, they're basically saying, we're not perfect. And that's why we have the Bill of Rights, which is 10 amendments to the original Constitution. There were supposed to be 12 amendments, only 10 got through. And things like now we take it for granted, like the Bill of Rights says, First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, etc. And when I say about freedom of religion, it means we will not establish one religion over the other, and we will not allow you to do the free exercise of religion. Just like freedom of speech. You have freedom of speech, but that doesn't mean you can say whatever the hell you want. Like freedom of speech means you could say what you want, and it's the mnemonic FIDO, fighting words, incitement to riot, defamation of character, obscenities. I'll stop teaching common law like I used to teach at West Point and go back to the point. That is why I'm so hopeful about the next generation in our country. We have a great country. And I think, frankly, right now it's a little bit of a dark moment. I'm not trying to be negative, with some tariffs against our allies like Japan and UK, et cetera, and some other things that I don't agree with. But I'd also say if you spend 10 minutes with these young Americans that are in high school and in college, they want to give back. In fact, this generation wants to give back more than the other generation. Now, in the military, the things that give me concern is that only 26% of young Americans can even join the military. Why? Because of the obesity crisis in America. 70% of Americans are overweight or obese. And I'm not fat shaming, I'm not right. But again, to our core principles of our country, what makes us great is that, yes, we have the number one economy in the world, we have the number one military in the world, but that's not our God-given right. So that's why we have to make sure we're going back to the Athens and Sparta of America, what John F. Kennedy used to talk about the presidential fitness test, making sure that you can, run a mile if you're, physically able to, right? But to work toward that, to do push-ups and, things like that. Like we can't just outsource that to the warrior class of America, to our warriors in the military or first responders. We all should have a part to play in that in case something bad happens. And again, we don't want anything bad to happen, but I just think that more Americans should go serve their country. And it doesn't have to be the military. It could be in the Peace Corps. It could be to Teach for America, right? These are the things that all Americans should kind of, like what you do in Israel, get used to, and then put some financial rewards behind that. You're never going to make a ton of money on it, right? But maybe we can give you the VA home loan where you don't have to put, 20% down. Maybe we can give you like a watered down version of the GI Bill and make, community college for free if you go get 2 years first, to go serve our communities or our country in a certain way. So that's what gives me hope. We have a lot of work to get there, but I think our core Constitution and folks who believe in the greatness of America, I think with our hard work and determination, and frankly, folks who are willing to fight to make it better, not just sit in silence and just put their hands up, that's what gives me hope.
And I love what you highlighted about the Constitution and the power of equality and its primacy in the foundations of American democracy, and in all world religions, the power of love and of loving everyone. Yeah.
I talk real quick. I talk about leading with love, right? And I talk about that Constitution, which said, with Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, it's a 3 co-equal branches of government: legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch. Most Americans cannot name one branch of the government. That's wrong. And that's why I'm a big believer in things like the National Civics Bee. Instead of having a spelling bee, we can still have spelling bees. We'll have a civics bee in 7th and 8th grade to get these young Americans to care about civics in America, not just history, but civics and active engagement. So, but to your point, I do believe in things like leading with love, incredibly important.
What does leading with love mean?
That means, what we call in Philly about having a row house mentality, taking care of people on your left and your right. When Mrs. Deegan on our block, her husband was older. He had the Alice machine. He was a World War II veteran. My brother and I shoveled her steps when it snowed for free. We didn't ask her to knock on the door. Can we shovel your snow? We just shoveled her snow. And by the way, my parents made sure we did theirs first before we did our own. Things like, when our neighbor ran out of milk, we gave him some more milk, asking for help. Like, that's just how, and by the way, and when me and my brother were acting up, our neighbors knew they could go and say, yo, you guys better calm down. You guys better knock it off. And, my parents were, it took a village, right? Because, you can go astray. My parents couldn't be around because they're both working full time, et cetera. So for me, living with love means, living in Beatitudes. It means, trying to be inclusive in your life, trying to plant positive things in your life, living with the attitude of gratitude. But also means when you love someone, that means, you protect them too. And if the people that you love are getting bullied or getting abused, whether it's through a government or by an individual, you can't look the other way. There's a special place in hell for people who know better, that just are quiet and don't do what they should be doing when they know they should be doing it.
Yeah, Patrick, it sounds like we grew up in very similar communities with parents and neighbors who took a similar approach. And, my parents were very involved in the Catholic Church, and really specifically in service for communities like people with mental health issues, running a food bank, things like that, to provide for people who needed a hand to get back on their feet and to get by. And from your childhood, final question here, as a father yourself, how do you approach parenting?
Sometimes there's tough love. Like I think I'm friends with both of my kids. One's a senior in high school. Maggie, my son Jack, is a freshman. I think we're friends. I'm probably closer to my daughter and my son. But I'm their dad too, right? So sometimes I say no, and sometimes, and to be honest with you, sometimes being friends, it's hard. Like, my daughter, she tells me everything, right? And sometimes I don't want to hear it, to be honest with you, right? But I'm her dad and her friend, and but I'm a dad first. And listen, I'm really proud. She's going to Clemson University next year, right? And it's a great school. She's probably going to go into the PA program, physician assistance program, and she can do Air Force ROTC, right? And I said, Max, go for a year. If you like it, stay with it. I didn't know, right? And she just earned a, $20,000 scholarship. I was like, if you don't like it, this is your life. This isn't your dad's life. You don't have to be the fourth generation Murphys that served in the military, but I think it does open up some doors for you. So I'm glad you chose to do it. And if you don't like it, you don't have to contract until after what's called your second year in college, and you don't have to do it. Right now, would I have loved her to go to West Point? Would I have loved her because I taught there and was on the board there? Yeah. But she wanted to go to school in the South. She fell in love with Clemson. It's a big school, but it's a small school. It's only 6,000 freshmen. And I'm really proud of her. It was her own call and her decision, and she's getting after it. And for me, I'm based in Pennsylvania. I told her, I'm like, Mags, I teach at War Business School, and I just talked to one of the other business school professors at Clemson. Any chance you can sneak down here at least once a month? I'm like, so I said, Max, can I come down there? I go, I promise you, I'm not going to be Frank the Tank. I'm not going to hang out with you and drink with you, nothing. But can we, if I go down there, can we go to dinner? If I'm teaching on a Thursday, can we go to dinner that night? And then, I'll get out of your hair, but at least, I'd love to see you once a month, when you're my baby girl, I love you. And I'm letting go in a sense, but I'm never, ever going to let go completely. She's always going to be, close to my heart, and I'm always going to support her. But I also tell her, hey, listen, to be honest with you, I'm my senior year of college, I had a full scholarship because of the Army. I earned a 2-year scholarship. I didn't go to Cancun with my classmates. I couldn't afford the $400 because I was applying to law schools, right? It was $50 per application. I applied to 6 schools. I got in a bunch of them. But I said, I remember being I couldn't ask my parents for money because they didn't have it, right? And I remember thinking to myself, I never was mad at my parents. I was never mad. And I was working, but when I was working, it was for beer money. It was to hang out, and I didn't have enough. But what I did, I'd saved, besides the rent that I had to pay for, it was going to my law school applications. And, that was a choice I made, and that's okay. And I learned delayed gratification, a long time ago. And I don't think I called it delayed gratification. I didn't know it was delayed gratification, but I had people around me that believed in me that said, hey, Patrick, you should go to law school. And I remember thinking, and it was this guy, Mr. O'Connor. I said, Mr. O'Connor, I'm not as smart as you. And And he goes, Patrick, I wasn't that smart when I was 21. He's like, you're doing fine. He goes, keep your grades up. And got 3.8. And then I had the confidence because he believed in me to go to law school. Right. And, and then law school, because I was already in the Army, opened up to me being a, military prosecutor, and then a federal prosecutor, and then teaching at West Point, and then going to combat twice. Like I've been so blessed, but I would say, bottom line is, if you live with an attitude of gratitude, if you're willing to do great delayed gratification, which includes like investing and compound interest and put money aside, being disciplined and not debt spending and not getting a fancy new car. Like I could go buy a new car. I'd choose not to. You know why? Because it would irritate me to buy a new car and know it's 20% going to be cheaper when I drive it off the lot, right? So I just go buy cars that are a year, 2, 3 years old and buy them used and do it that way. Like, but everyone's different. And I think even, what I tell Wharton students, don't be part of the broke middle class or broke upper class. That means when you make a lot of money, you're spending a lot of money. It's easy to get caught in the keeping up with the Joneses, right? Have goals, have desires, right? Treat yourself when you can treat yourself. But at the same time, put money aside for a 3-month emergency relief, of salary. Take care of your mom and dad. Take care of people who are less fortunate. Give back to your church or to your community with your, not just your time, but also, your treasure, because, it's important to earn it, but it's also important to give it away to people who are less fortunate and not just think that's for other people to do.
When you end up having success in your life, and I'm using the word you broadly, that applies to anybody who's listening to this and to you as well, because something that you just said really jumped out at me. You mentioned that professor who took the time to take you aside and say, hey, you can do this. You might not have the vision right now, or this might not be something you can hold in your mind, but this is all possible for you. And, that's something anybody can do when you have someone around you, whether it's an employee or you're in any other context, a peer, just a kind word and giving someone some encouragement when they've actually earned it. And you see that possibility, it's kind of wild how much it can open the aperture for someone. Not that you, Patrick, needed that. Like, you clearly are someone with a lot of energy and are relentless and have a lot of drive. But it is interesting to think about how powerful a kind word can be for someone.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would say to you, but that's like a force multiplier too, right? When you live a life of purpose, it's a force multiplier within your own life, but also that means giving back. So like today, like I said to you earlier, like I'm my kids, I'm their dad first and their friend, but being a good friend doesn't mean just backstopping people, right? I'm the coach too, like meaning, like I had a young guy, I mentored him, young African-American kid from Bucks County. He's down in Virginia now. I always kept touch when he's back home visiting his mom. He's single mom. Like I grabbed coffee with him at the local, Barnes and Noble, et cetera. And he's like, hey, Patrick, I know you're Yahoo Finance. I have my own show there. It's called Warrior Money. It airs every week. And he's like, there's a job for a producer I'm going to apply to. Can you help me? So I said, yeah, send me your resume. And I'm like, hey, man, I personally took the time. I called him this morning. He sent to me yesterday. I said, yo, brother, I read this at 5 a.m. this morning. I go, I read your resume and I read the qualifications for the job. It says you need 4 years of podcast production experience. Your resume doesn't say you do. Do you have it? He goes, yeah, I help podcasts with my clients. I go, then you got to redo your resume to say that, because I could put a good word in for you, but it's going to be if the tie goes to the runner. Like, you got to earn that. Like, you got to show, like, it's got to jump out. So they're not thinking I'm trying to get you in under the, like, it doesn't work that way, brother. So I'm like, I need you this weekend, redo your resume. And I go, and here's the lady's name who runs all the podcasts. She's the head producer. I go, I'm going to see her Tuesday. Give me this Monday. I'm going to email to her Monday. And hopefully I'll talk to her and reinforce it on Tuesday. But, and I go, and I can't guarantee, but like, I'll fight for you. But like, as Jerry Maguire said, help me, help you. Help me, help you, right? And that's part of that, is being a coach and telling people how they just got to recalibrate, but believing in them, but guiding them along the way, and not just being like, you could like because I will say, a lot of veterans say, hey, I want to be a congressman like you. I'm going to run for the U.S. Congress. And I say, whoa. I go, we need more veterans in political public service. It used to be 4 out of 5 members of Congress were veterans. Now it's less than 1 out of every 5. But I go, also though, there's 600,000 elected musicians in America. You want to go for the top 535. Yeah. Do you have $1 million or $3 million? Because these races that do you have ways to raise that money? Right? Did you ever work a campaign before? I worked campaigns. I was in the Army, but when I got out, I worked a presidential campaign for free for months. And then I volunteered for other campaigns. And then I ran myself on the third one, right? But I followed it for a decade. All this, you just can't go into the big end of the pool right away. I go, sometimes you can if you've been working toward that. But just because, you can't go move into a district because you're a veteran and say, I'm going to be your congressman. People are like, dude, who the hell are you? Or Dudette, who the hell are you? You gotta know and learn and read books and plan your work and then work your plan. Just don't go half-ass into it.
Patrick is a longtime fan of your Substack and somebody who's followed your career. It's been awesome to get to have this chance to chop it up today.
Yeah, listen, I'm sorry I went into the whole Con Law, 3 co-legal branch of government, it's rocks, paper, scissors. I love our country. I love our Constitution. And I love our nation. Our nation is the greatest nation on earth because we're a good country. We're not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. But I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you letting people know. It's important to choose the hard way. Life is not easy, but you can get great purpose and accomplishment if you put your nose to the grindstone, if you have that growth mentality, if you have that grit, and you do things that are better and bigger than yourself. So God bless you. Thanks for having me on.
You can find more about Patrick at patrickjmurphy.com, and you can find him on Instagram at patrickmurphypa. Thanks for listening to Choose the Hard Way. Please take 3 seconds and hit 5 stars and subscribe wherever you listen. If you're a senior executive who's serious about becoming a world-class communicator, One Real Voice is here to help. DM me at HardwayPod to learn more or send an email to hello@onerealvoice.com. With over $1 trillion in transactions to date, blockchain.com is your trusted partner on your crypto journey. Go to blockchain.com to get started today. No experience required. Lauf bikes are elegant. They're fast. They're a lot of fun to ride. And that's why when I ride, I Lauf. On gravel, I'm on the Lauf Segla. On road, I'm on the Lauf Utald all-road. They're elegant products that just work better than everything else. You can find them at laufcycles.com. Thanks for listening.